Yup, the Cleveland Browns don't have a lot of draft capital, and that's okay. And that's not even what we're necessarily going to talk about, because what we need to talk about in this is how the Browns view their current draft picks, and then we're going to put that test up. We're going to talk about what Andrew Berry said recently, giving some perspective at the annual league meeting, and we're going to talk about what that means and if he's crazy or if he makes sense based on what their current roster is. So that's what we're going to do. Before we get into that, just a couple of things for you. I'm putting this video out in between Good Friday and Easter. So I do, depending on when you watch it, want to say he is risen. Happy Easter to everybody out there. And also just thank you for continuing to watch this channel. If you have yet to do so, please hit that subscribe button. So thankful for the community that we've grown here. As you know, it started with another channel, Sports Talk Detroit. And this is the second channel we ever created out of a love for teams that the national media ignores. And we get the Browns fans, and Browns fans, you get us as Lions fans. So absolutely love doing videos talking about the Browns. And the closer we get, or the further we get away from last season and the closer we get to next season, the more I realize the Cleveland Browns have a roster that is absolutely here to stay. And I think they have the correct pieces in place to win. And I think that Andrew Berry feels the same way. And an article that you can see here from clevelandbrowns.com, Browns look at their current draft picks as long-term investment in players. So we're going to talk more about what that means. Their picks that they own here are, according to Tankathon, pick 54, that's round 2, pick 22. They have pick 85, that's round 3, pick 21. And then pick 156, 206, and 243. That is a 5th, a 6th, and a 7th round, respectively. Every time they're picking in the back third of whatever round they are picking in. Now, Chris Jenkins, if they could get him, by the way, that'd be a really good selection at 54. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about how they view draft picks. And when you're looking at it as a long-term investment, and a long-term solution. In other words, these players that you pick up at 54, at 85, at 156, you are going to use those, and you hope that those become future starters. That those are the players that replace your good players now. But in order to do that, you need to have a team that has a solid starting lineup. So we need to look into, do they have a solid starting lineup? And then I'll get to quotes from Barry. All right, so let's first look at the defensive side of the ball. All right, this is one of the best defensive lines in football. We know that. It has a solid interior with phenomenal edge play. Phenomenal edge play. This is a DB group that runs 3 deep. All right, you got Emerson, you got Ward there already. All right, this is a linebacking crew that you're wondering, like, oh, what are they going to do with this? All right, but a lot of times they play 3 corners anyway. But then they go out and they bring in Jordan Hicks, a veteran linebacker that has done nothing but play well. All right, so they bring him in. You know, he's going to thrive in this system. And then they have Thornhill and Delpit at the back end. The defense is still the defense. They've done a good job of keeping that intact and keeping that a top 5 squad this offseason. The offense, on the same time, if the offensive line stays healthy, you now have underrated one of the better offensive lines in the league. I think at full capacity, when healthy, this is probably the 5th or 6th best O-line in the National Football League. There is talent there. Tight end with Njoku, good to go. Now your receivers, you move Elijah Moore into the slot where he's a more natural fit as a 3rd option rather than a 2nd option, which did not work for him because you bring in Jerry Jeudy and you already have Cooper. You have Chubb, you have Watson. Look, I think it is clear that this is a starting lineup that absolutely has enough in order to be successful. So what that allows you to do when there's no glaring holes. Now, I know what you're thinking, like, well, we could definitely use a middle linebacker. Great. All right, I agree. You could use a linebacker, but it's not one of those things where it's like, we must have it now. All right, so what that allows you to do is go into the draft and you can draft for need. All right. He had this situation before, and I'll show you this, where the Browns did not have a first-round pick and found ways to be flexible and add talent. In 2022, the Browns selected Martin Emerson Jr. as the 68th overall pick in the third round. And here's what Barry had to say about that. I don't think anyone thought we were going to take a corner. Why? Because they had a couple. But you just can't be so rigid or dogmatic. And I've told you guys this before. We don't think of the draft as addressing need necessarily. We think about it more as a long-term investment in the roster. And I think that's a perfect example as to why, or as example of why. And that is what you need to do. Right? That's what you need to do. All right, and then you need to develop those players so that they can become good players on your roster. I think you've seen our rookie class. With our rookie class, we're willing to really use all of our resources that we have. He said this at the Combine. If you can draft a third-round pick or a fifth-round pick and turn them into a first-round talent, quote unquote, you're winning on the margin. So development of players is a really big part of our operation. All right. So in part, it almost feels like he is happy, Stefanski or Barry, with saying, no, we don't need a first round pick. We have talent. We don't necessarily need that because we trust our ability to find this talent later in the draft. Any other teams you can think of that have done this to success? I can think of one. All right. I can think of one. It's the LA Rams. I can think of more than one, but the LA Rams are the best example of this, where basically for like 4 or 5 years, they're like, who cares about number one picks? We don't care about first round picks. In fact, the Lions GM, Brad Holmes, said he's actually more comfortable as the draft goes on. He's more comfortable having a later first round pick. The second and third round picks, he loved those, fourth and fifth, because early first round, he feels like it's easier. Like, yeah, it's hard to miss up there, but it becomes more what's the word I want to use? Challenging, funner. Like it becomes something that you enjoy doing. All right. The Browns have a gap in their picks. We know that. They don't have a fourth round pick between their third round pick at 85 and their fifth round pick at 156. All right. Those are 71 picks. Yet Barry said that while the potential for movement of their picks isn't off the table, it also isn't likely. Here's what he said. He said, I'd say probably less so because of the gap in picks. We think about it less in terms of, hey, let's say the aggregate number of picks between our selections, and more about, let's say, the ranges of the draft when you're getting similar talent, or historically where you get similar talent. Once you get to that point of the draft, the likelihood that you're getting a starter or a role player, it flattens pretty significantly, and probably a lot earlier than people maybe externally realize. So that's not really a huge consideration for me. And basically what he's saying is you have to understand how you're going to use these picks. All right, you have to understand how you use these picks. So pick 54 and 85, those need to be future starters on this team. If you get a future starter with pick 156, you're ahead of the curve. That's the biggest margin. That's what he talked about. If you can make that a first-round talent, awesome. These two picks right here, very unlikely that they become future starters, so you're looking to draft guys that are going to be immediate contributors on special teams that maybe could turn into good depth pieces and things like that on the cheap. That's what you're looking for. All right. Just thought I'd throw it all out there. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Happy Easter. Like, subscribe. See you on the next one.